Hey guys, it's me Lachlan. I'm here today with a brand new video with some pretty interesting gameplay and a very interesting topic to talk about. Now today's gameplay actually features some Naval Strike Rush and a couple of other game modes, playing with Vincent0k from Twitter, otherwise known as Vincent, who is the global community manager of Battlefield. He hopped into one of our servers and we had a couple of good games together, so I was pretty happy with this footage that we landed today. Now today's video is something which is relatively important about Battlefield and something that I feel as though has been kind of nagging away at me for the last couple of months. Even after this game came out straight away, it's been getting at me quite a bit. Now I'd just like to clarify that this is going to be a video of constructive criticism. It's not going to be an attack, it's not going to be slating DICE or slating EA, it's just going to be constructive criticism of how they operate and what they're doing right now, which is drastically wrong and kind of morally wrong in the same way as well, but we don't really know the ins and outs of it all. This is just primary, from what I understand, from what I see, and what I see from a company basis and how they operate on a regular basis. And we're just going to talk about Battlefield in general and some of the issues it's faced and some of the issues it's still facing, alongside how it's actually mistreating us, the players. So I'm going to kick it off by talking about some fundamental issues which have essentially been plaguing the game ever since its launch in 2013 and have essentially created a very uneven, unbalanced Battlefield, which is incredibly damaging to the core base of players, some of the more hardcore players and some favoured Battlefield fans who have been here from the get-go. This will be especially difficult for them to handle the game, the state that it's in. So to kick off this list of constructive criticism in terms of fundamentals, we have hit registration, and hit registration has essentially made every single gun battle on Battlefield to date unbalanced and inaccurate. The outcomes of these fights from day one have been completely misinterpreted. Now, hit registration, essentially, if you don't know yet, is when I fire a bullet and hits a player, whether or not that damage registers, whether or not my bullet, although I've seen it hit the player, and although I've probably been given a hit marker, whether or not it's actually, gone through on the system. And at the moment, that's very, very often. It's a regular occurrence across all the base versions of Battlefield, not on the CTE as of yet, seeing as they've managed to fix it up a bit. But literally, it's hard to kind of process in your mind that almost every time you've killed a player on Battlefield, maybe you've just about lived by a fraction of like your health bar, maybe he's just about lived, maybe you even traded kills. That's primarily down to the fact that this game has been fundamentally flawed since it launched. Now, every time I've killed someone, must have killed nearly 3,000 players on Battlefield quite easily just with a single weapon. I've probably got an excess of 30,000 kills. So it's hard to think that every time that's happened, there is that background information that essentially everything from now until the new patch, from the start to now, it's all been completely inaccurate. There's a potential, difference, a potential skill level that I actually could not be very good at this game, or somebody else is very good at the game instead. And we don't know that because we can't tell whether or not we're accurate, we can't tell whether or not we're doing a good job. And it's really difficult just to, think tactically and run through a game which is meant to be tactics based when you know that there's background issues which are causing problems for you. Next is the refresh rate, and the refresh rate at the moment on Battlefield is 10 Hz, and this is how quickly information is transferred between a player to the server, and for the server to comprehend it, and for the game to actually make those actions come true. Now, at 10 Hz for a game of this scale, what this essentially creates is a Battlefield which doesn't legitimately, in terms of logic and physics, make much sense. Now, if you've ever had it where you've run around a corner and you've been killed, in Battlefield 3, you're probably just going to assume, oh shit, he blew up the wall and now he's killed me. In Battlefield 4, if you run around the corner and you get killed, chances are he was firing at you a second ago, 3 seconds ago. You've made it possible, but you're going to die anyway. This is something which is kind of an issue across many games. You can even look at Call of Duty as a franchise where this happens, even though it's on a considerably smaller scale. But anyway, I digress. But on Battlefield, it just essentially makes a game which is, again, potentially game-breaking. I mean, the amount of times you can imagine, I don't know, you've been in a ditch or in a building or something, you've ducked behind cover and you're still dead. It's very unfair, it's very annoying and frustrating beyond anything, and that's, something critical as well. And there's also the general weapon balancing and stuff like that that comes along with all these game fundamentals, which do shift on a regular occurrence. We see different guns being balanced at different dates, and these things just happen as a whole. All of this, as of now, is being fixed on the CTE, and a new patch is coming out in early September, which will give this to the retail version of the game. We've also got some other things in there, like visual recoil, so how you can actually see the recoil other than the gun just shaking around for no particular reason, and a couple of other, key core gameplay elements that are being adjusted. And this is happening now in September, which is almost 10 months since the game launched. 10 months since the game launched, and we've been complaining about this from probably week 1. And I think that this is something which is just, kind of ridiculous to think about. And this all comes down to how DICE and EA construct themselves and how they work. And like I said, this isn't an attack on these companies. This is just general constructive criticism about what they're doing is wrong, and whether or not they probably don't even realize that they're doing this, which makes them look like complete and utter douchebags. Now, this thing that I'm talking about is a process, and I like to call it the denial process, and there's a very good video by Jim Sterling. He is a video games writer, reviewer, and he also makes videos on YouTube as well, and I'll link this video in the description below. And he basically explains that EA and DICE as a whole are essentially saving themselves money and working as a money machine corporation rather than actually fixing the game itself. And this was something which really opened my eyes when I actually heard him say it. Now, we had this game come out in like November, and from about week 1, week 2, we were complaining that there was some serious issues with the game. We knew this, we had video evidence, the likes of other YouTubers also posted up video evidence showing the flaws that have been found and exploited inside Battlefield 4. And this process proceeds. They continue to ignore us. They carry on ignoring us, they don't even acknowledge the fact that these flaws are there, and they carry on doing this. And they kept doing this for a couple of months. And then they released maybe 1 or 2 weapon balances when DLCs came out. And that was about it. That's all we heard from them. They continue to ignore it. They continue to ignore it. They carry on doing this for months and months. And finally, about halfway through the game's lifespan, we get an acknowledgement. We get an acknowledgement that the game is fundamentally flawed. We got a message from like EA's top men saying, look, the game was badly done at launch, and this will never happen again, in inverted, you can't even see my fingers at the moment, but you know exactly what I'm saying. The guy essentially acknowledged the fact that the game was broken and the game was fundamentally damaged, and that this was causing frustration for the Battlefield game. It was causing frustration across the player base. And then they act all apologetic, and they seem as though they are the heroes. They seem as though they're the mighty heroes. We're going to fix our game after 7 or 8 months, and because we're very appreciative of the fact that we're finally going to see some fixes, we don't even notice that we're being completely screwed over. Now, Jim Sterling continued to proceed that, yep, they carried on doing this, they acknowledged the game, the developers acknowledged some of the issues, some of the key community managers and people in general, forums, Reddit, you name it, they've named and shamed some of the issues in the game, and they're acting as though they are the Don Megas and they're going to fix everything in this game. And then they finally say that they're going to fix this, and this is when CTE launched, and this was probably, a month back from now, so probably about July CTE launched, maybe late June, and it's coming into effect now with some retail patches. And here we are, a year later, and this was one of his main points of this video, is that they continue to pretend as though they're fixing things, they continue to acknowledge things, make themselves to look out the hero of everything here, and then, in the end, we've hit the game's end of its lifespan, where Frostbite 3 is fundamentally damaged as a whole, which they are using in later titles, and the game's finished its lifespan. We're heading on to Hardline, we're heading on to Battlefront, and we're heading on to all of these other games, and we're still going to buy them. So in the end, they've made minor fixes to an engine which is severely damaged and made themselves to look like PR champions, which is all well and good for them. And we're going to go buy their next game, which is probably Hardline or Battlefront, depending on dates. We're going to pick up this game, it's probably going to be damaged at launch, and we've allowed them to make money, we've allowed them to win, we've allowed the player base as a whole to have literally no voice whatsoever. Sure, they're acknowledging us, sure they're making a CTE, sure they're trying to fix the game, but this is in September nearly. They're going to fix the game in September. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not playing Battlefield in September. I'm not playing Battlefield in winter. I'm not playing Battlefield until Final Stand comes out. I'm picking up all these brand new titles which probably work at launch. And they know that. They know that the rush of games is coming. They know that Hardline is delayed. and we're going to carry on playing this game occasionally, but they know that the game has a 1-year lifespan, and they know that that 1-year lifespan is over, and essentially I think after this CTE patch we will maybe see 1 retail patch, maybe 2 if we're lucky, and that will be it. And they would have made their money's worth. They wouldn't have had to have done as much of the development process as they've had, and as a whole, EA and DICE together, although they may not intentionally do this, EA possibly would intentionally do this, but maybe not DICE, because, you know, we've come to respect their developers as a whole. We know them on a personal basis through Reddit. We've seen interviews with them. You know, you've maybe even spoken to some of these guys, and I don't think it's down to them. But it's the fact that the game as a whole has been basically put through this process of denial, which allows them to make money and allows them to do well financially, and EA to post up massive profits throughout the year. And I don't think it is down to DICE. I don't think it is them as a dev team. They've got lots of games coming up. They've got Battlefield and Hardline coming up, and we're all going to buy those games, despite the fact that we know Battlefield 4, which is the engine they're running off, is completely broken. But we will do it anyway as a consumer, because we don't really think about these cognitive features. And when Jim Sterling explained this in a video, I was incredibly open to the fact that we really should be criticizing a team which has left the game broken for over 10 months. You know, I like DICE developers. I've spoken to a few of them on Twitter. You know, I've even spoken to a few of them in person. Brilliant guys, brilliant dev team. And it's very rare for a company as a whole to actually directly be in touch with the community to try and make the game better. Some companies just leave the game as it is, bang, that's what you're having, live with it. DICE do their best to try and actually fix stuff. But it's the fact that they're kind of being pushed into this process by the fact that they have more game releases. Now, of course, if you think if DICE didn't have Battlefront, if DICE didn't have part of Hardline to work with, they would be doing more CTE. They would be doing much more to improve this game and have more of a development team on this game to try and do their best to fix it. But they're not, because they're being pushed by publishers to try and get this game out as fast as possible. Get Battlefront out. Get part of Hardline that you're working on out, so we can, you know, fix the Frostbite engine and try and make sure this game doesn't have a crappy launch. But it's going to happen. Frostbite 3 has been developed, Hardline has been developed off of the broken Frostbite 3. They didn't fix Frostbite 3 when they started making Hardline, and they're probably just going to have to throw the CTE patches of Battlefield 4 in there to try and do their best. It's not going to be the same. Visceral could do their best to make Frostbite 3 a better engine, but as a whole, we've gone through the denial process. They've made their money. Battlefield 4 remains a broken game, slightly less broken as of September. And as a whole collective, we have been royally fucked on a different scale. It's kind of difficult to get through as a player, as a fan of Battlefield. But in the end, that's what it is. We've been royally screwed over by the companies. And as a whole, as a player, I find that although Battlefield isn't an annual thing, DICE and EA are an annual company. They make games on an annual basis, like I mentioned, Battlefront Hardline, Mirror's Edge, and they will continue to successively make money off of engines which aren't functioning correctly, and they will continue to do this. They will build Frostbite 4 off of the broken Frostbite 3 engine. These processes will accumulate, and we will find that we have some games which really are in need of serious financial and development power, and we will never get them. Possibly most likely down to EA as a whole, and I do blame mostly of this onto EA solely because they are a money machine. It's what they're meant to do, and they're pushing DICE to make these games as fast as possible. They're pushing them with multiple games across multiple development companies. You know, you've got DICE LA, you know, you've got DICE Stockholm, and they're doing their best to make these games and try and to some degree manage and work with previous titles to make sure that they're working at a good rate, but it's not working on their behalf. There are still lots of things in Battlefield I would change right now. For starters, I would get these patches out quick and fast. I would get them out as huge bundles, and I would get them out as soon as you can. Even if it does break 300 other things, just show that you're actually putting some serious damn effort into getting this game done. Put maybe 2 or 3 retail patches out in the time Hardline launches. Secondly, fix balancing. Balancing from Battlefield 3 was perfect. Go back to then. Stop trying to change things. Innovation is fantastic, but the prime example that I would like to use is that carbines should not be allowed across every single piece of player. I think Carbine should be restricted to engineer and PDWs be opened up to every player, because that's a realistic causation, something which could potentially happen. Most recons in real life will use PDWs on a regular basis. It's just something which I've gone through and thought about, which would make the game much more better. We've seen the Battlefield 3 class restrictions essentially balanced most of the game for us. You know, innovation's fantastic, but they need to work on this on a serious scale. Drop patches, balance the game, push back release dates. We saw Hardline get delayed. Push back Battlefront far and beyond, so you have a pristine Frostbite 3 by the time you launch that game. Don't work on Frostbite 4 until Frostbite 3 is finished, and tell EA to go and do one so you can do your best to make these games as best as you can and close that void between the community. The community and the dev team and the companies and publishers that are making this. Battlefield 3, Battlefield Bad Company, it was a very small gap, hand in hand almost. Battlefield 4, we are miles apart from each other. We are on different pages. There is not that much of a connectivity. Sure, we have some community-based, oh yeah, you guys are going to enjoy this, you're going to have an appreciation month. But what is an appreciation month with digital things which cost you no money to develop? What is that? You know, a couple of camos, a couple of XP boosts, that's nothing to you. That's not damaging to your in-game economy. That's not damaging to a dev team. That's a couple of color palette changes that I've seen mods do. I've seen cinematic tools do on Battlefield. It's really not that hard to do. How about we invest some money into Frostbite 3, get this engine sorted, get things done, and make sure that Battlefield is a pristine game, and make sure every DICE game is a pristine game. So guys, that's about it for today's video. And this was something which I felt also needed to be said. It was something which is incredibly important. And, you know, huge shout out to Jim Sterling for essentially building the basis of what this video has gone off of. Again, channel in the description below. The guy is a real champion. He's a game criticizer to the max, but he does it for the right reasons. And, you know, I want to see Battlefield and Frostbite, I want to see DICE as a whole do really well as a fan. It's something I want to see them do. It's important to me. You know, I respect them, I respect the developers, I respect the guys down there, I respect Visceral as well, and I just want to see this game reach its fullest potential, especially after 10 months or so. So guys, like I said, it's been me, Lachlan. Thank you for watching this incredibly long video, somewhat of a constructive rant. Hopefully we can get this through to maybe some important people, maybe they get to see this thing, and you never know, maybe we see some changes in the next couple of months. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you again in another video.